Welcome to Quest 2. We are going to be talking about reading expository text. In our last quest, we looked at creative or literary nonfiction, and we looked at all of the exciting ways that authors use words and figurative language and imagery and all kinds of description to make nonfiction writing seem more like fiction and bring a human element into it. This time, we're going to be looking at expository or informational text that's not in that creative vein. So, what we're going to be looking at is more like what you might see in a textbook, like your government book, or in your biology book. And so, textbook kind of reading where information is communicated as simply and directly as possible, right? I mean, there are difficult vocabulary words for each subject, but we don't get a lot of descriptive language or talking about how the author feels about something or lots of imagery or anything like that. Many newspaper articles are like this. They communicate in newspapers as efficiently as possible because it costs money when the text is longer. So often articles are just short and to the point and they don't put anything extra. You also see this kind of writing in something like a newsletter. This is a Pearland United Soccer handout. It's a flyer for parents. And it is just very simple and to the point. This is how much money you're going to give us. This is when you're going to need to worry about giving your kids to practice and that kind of thing. Or even if you were to go online and look at something like WebMD and you're just have a cold and you're dying and it doesn't give you a ton of information that you don't need. It's just this is what sinusitis is. These are the symptoms. This is what you should do about it, really directly. And here's another example. This is actually an online newspaper article. And the article's really short and to the point. Sometimes that kind of text will use graphs or statistics to support a point, to illustrate a point, because it's easier to understand when there's a graph. You can see that the textbook did the same thing. So we're going to explore it a little bit more together. Last time when we looked at our literary nonfiction, we read an article and practiced a technique called say do. And we summarized the article in the left-hand margin, and then in the right-hand margin, we identified what the author was doing with the words and to identify the author's craft. So we're going to do the same thing with our expository text. And I have just a really small list of some things that authors do pretty frequently in expository writing. So you might see an author introduce an idea to the reader or explain or illustrate something that the reader might not know. Authors often use graphs to support or substantiate their claims. They also use statistics to support or substantiate their claims. They might relate an idea to something else to help clarify for the reader. So if it's a really complicated scientific process, they might relate it to something that's more commonplace like cooking, just so the reader can understand it better. They might cite experts to support a claim, and they might restate or summarize ideas to make them easier for the reader to understand. So we're going to look at a text together, and we can have this list in front of us to see if the author does any of these things. Now, these are not the only things that authors do, but these are things that you would probably run into fairly regularly. I just wanted to go over really quickly the say do with you again. We have our little article from our first slide here about global warming, and it's super, super short, and I know it's hard to read, but I just wanted to kind of give you an example. So the summary is that global warming is observable if changes in temperature are studied using decades instead of individual years. And so that's a summary of what's going on right here. And what the author is doing is the author is using a graph to substantiate his claim. So he makes a claim up here that you can see global warming if you really think about decades instead of single years. And then he substantiates the claim by providing a graph that incorporates statistics. So that's just an example of what a say-do might look like in an expository text. So we're going to move on and actually read an article together and go through it together, but I just wanted to refresh what the say-do looks like in case it's been a while since you've seen it from the first quest.